Hi, I'm Jay, and today we're going to tie one of the founding flies for ice fishing. Stay tuned. And we're back. So, good morning. We are back at the bench today. Today's a perfect day to stay inside, try to keep warm. Woke up this morning to low single digits. The weather's been great. The lakes have been freezing nicely. Was out Saturday on a solid 9 inches of black ice, nice clear ice, and did pretty well. Wanted to go out fishing today, but I do have kind of a family thing in the afternoon, so perfect time to get sit down in front of the camera and just have some fun. So what I had been doing most of the morning is was looking through my new old book, Ice Fishing for Everybody by Byron W Dalrymple. This book was copyright 1948. This is first printing. Lantern Press was the publisher. And it's, I enjoy going through these old books, reading about some of the techniques and whatnot that were used, back in the day. So I usually gravitate towards the chapters that talk about lures and bait and whatnot. And this has a small chapter. It has a fairly large chapter on baits, but in terms of lures or even jigs, very sparse, because at this time, at least with this author, the information, or it was new. So what I'm going to tie here today is a jig that was described in this book, and I guess I consider it one of the founding ice flies. So looking through the information here, and he does preface this with saying that more than likely numerous fishermen, numerous tiers simultaneously would develop ice jigs, but mentions that credit is generally given to Ben Allen, Drayton Plains, Michigan, for developing this jig. It's a jig that is this was tied primarily to ice fish for bluegill. It probably would be a great springtime bait, especially during mayfly hatch, as this does. It's intended to represent a wiggler or a mayfly nymph. I know guys in the Midwest, they'll actually use live wigglers when fishing perch. They're pretty big, 1 inch to 2 inches, maybe inch to inch and a half, inch to inch and a quarter maybe. But they're big enough to pick up and put on a hook. This is an interesting design where the weight is placed at the bend of the hook. And I think that is to give that action of, I guess the best way I could describe what I've observed on how a wiggler moves is it's much like a caterpillar. When you touch a caterpillar and it arches its back and then bends forward, into C shape and then an inverted C shape. That's kind of how they just move or swim. So adding the weight at the bottom of the hook near the bend on a vertically hanging jig, if you just give it a quick snap, the heel of the jig, the bend of the hook section of the jig will kick up, and in the eye of the jig will basically stay in the same position. So I kind of envision that as that wiggle action. So I do understand what they were kind of describing and what they were trying to get at. I did tie a few of these. There was some illustrations in here. And the description very clearly talks about 2 sections of palmered hackle tied in reverse. But the illustration just shows the hackle near the bend of the hook. So, you know, I played with a few different things. They did talk about the evolution to a more modern style ice jig, which looks very much like like a red tail, where you have a standard ball head jig with a palmered hackle or a marabou wing. But, you know, today I'm going to tie my best guess at what this description was based on the description and the illustration. And it's a fairly nice looking jig. Let's switch over real quick. So this is the first one I tied. Well, let me do it this way. This is the first one I tied. Now you put my glasses on here. Where I took a split shot and pressed it onto the bend of the hook. I did file down the 2 tabs that you squeeze to open the split shot, just so this looked more like a ball. It talks about a body tied on a floss body in some sort of red or orange color. This happened to be a dark red over a black thread base, so it does look a little dark. But it's a nice color. I definitely can see this. Oh, and I just realized I put my partridge away, but I will have to go get that. And the hackles were tied on with partridge. Fairly sparse was the description in terms of the wing. It did mention with the tail being the soft down-like hackle. Could that be marabou? I'm not exactly sure. Partridge made the most sense as it talked about the hackle being tied in the reverse. And there's a few different guesses on what tied reverse could mean. You know, you add the hackle tip first, tie it in, and you wrap it. But is that wrapping a collar of hackle and just wrapping it from right to left, but still keeping it fairly compact, so it's a collar? Or is it wrapping it in reverse from right to left down the shank of a hook, kind of like a woolly bugger? My best guess was that it was 2 separate hackle collars tied in reverse, so they would, as with my example, kind of bend backwards towards the bend of the hook, like so. Let's see, what else do we got here? I tied one with just the hackle up near the eye. Again, just a split shot near the bend of the hook. And it's a fairly sparse jig. I'm sure they tip these with maggots and fish them bare. Thinking of what a more modern interpretation would be, here is the same jig, or the same idea, the same pattern, tied on a 1/32 ball with a chrome ball. It's a pretty jig. I'm going to use each of these. Here's the same thing, but just adding a tail, again with the partridge. All pretty jigs. I can envision this floss body maybe wrapped with a wire of gold wire. Would look really good. And then lastly, and with this one, just changing the color of the head just to make it the same color as the bug body, you know, the natural bug itself. So that's what we're trying to do here today. The hook I'm using is a Mustad 3263B, size 8. Size 8, 10 were the couple sizes that they talk about in the book. And did I have... It might be in my tackle box, because I did use it this weekend. But I did tie a hook like this, and instead of the split shot, and the split shot I think are maybe a 1/32. I have a 5/32 tungsten bead. This is just a White River fly shop tungsten bead. And that's what I added to this hook. Just a spot of the UV clear just to hold, kind of glue it in place. You can't really see it. This does have a ball of thread. Since the tungsten bead is made to go up against the eye of the hook, and the eye is a little bit wider and holds it in place. What I did is I just added a small ball of thread, coated it with the UV, something that the bead can sit up against, and then put the UV on the back side of the bead, and so it's stuck in there well. But this also, with this smaller ball and then the larger ball, gives the illusion of the nymph's head. So we're going to place our weighted hook in the vise, and I'm going to use a 2-aught brown thread. This is just a regular Danville round nylon. Check this. I'll change this just slightly, just to straighten my hook shank. I'm going to lock this on. I'm with touching wraps, walk down to the weight, and then with touching wraps, walk it back. Do have to hold the hook because this is a fine wire hook, and I'm leaving about an eye's width of space behind the eye on the hook shank, leaving that bare. And first we will start off with our partridge feather. I have here just a soft hackle. It's a hen saddle in a natural color. Let's see here. So this is a full saddle, or a piece of a saddle. Soft hackled hen, speckled gray. I do like the natural colors. Here's some premium Hungarian partridge. This is just a regular hairline. Again, in the speckled or kind of a natural color. A dyed brown. This is just a nature spirit. but just a partridge, just a dyed partridge. Today we're going to use the hairline Hungarian, the more natural with, I like the grays, the dun, the speckled tans. So that's what we're going to use. And I have chosen one with kind of a wispy, marabou looking feathers, barbs on it. I have trimmed the tip, pulled some of these barbs down just to expose the tip. It's a very fine feather. You do want to do this gingerly, but I will lock this into place. In the reverse. And I am doing this, I haven't figured out the exact steps I would take to do this. Perhaps I would tie the floss bodies on separately, maybe do a whole bunch, just the floss body, and then do this part. You'll see here that I'll do a hackle, then the floss body, and then the final hackle. Not sure what the exact steps should be with this, and just making my best guess on the look of this fly and how it was originally tied. So we're tying this in reverse. See, I just broke my tip off. We are tying this in the reverse. So we're going to capture it tip first. Here's a different feather. So what I've done is I've exposed just the tip of the feather. I trim it so it's just a smaller triangle, not as much material. If I get my big fingers out of the way. There we go. We'll capture this in. With our hackle pliers, very gingerly. Gently pull the fibers back towards the bend of the hook. Lock this into place. So this is sparsely covering the weight at the bend of the hook. I now have a, 12 to 14 inch length of my, what do I have here today? This is a rust colored Unifloss. It's a single strand floss. Triple strand floss would be fine. Would probably help build up the body just a little bit with the 3 strands. Again, leaving about an eye's length behind the eye of the hook bare. And then I will just wrap this with touching wraps. Slightly overlapping wraps up the shank of the hook. As I'm doing this, I'm thinking actually maybe a size A thread base underneath this would give it a little bit more bulk. Wigglers are fairly thick. You know, they're like using a worm or a leech. I'll lock that into place. And then a partridge feather. Let's see. I don't want anything too stubby. Or too long. So again, I'll expose the tip. And I'll just trim it slightly, just to make it a smaller triangle. Tying this in reversed. So the tip of the feather is facing the eye of the hook. I'm just going to palmer a collar. I do pull the fibers back as best as I can. Before locking that into place. Snip that away. You can pull the fibers, any of the fibers that are trapped forward, just pull them back, and we add a few wraps. Just so they lay back towards the body. Looks pretty good, and I will finish this off with a whip finish tool. Quick look at this just to see how everything's hanging. Let me see if I can what do we think? So this ice fly, and what I'm calling one of the founding ice flies, was often called a jiggerbug. Jiggerbug was a little bit more modern design. Here is crediting Forrest Drew from Battle Creek, Michigan, for tying the jiggerbug. But like we said, this is to mimic a wiggler, which is a mayfly nymph. I'll put this back in the vise, and I'll use my lacquer-based head cement just on the head of this jig. And I'm, you know, my best guess, and the one I fished this weekend, my best guess is the idea is this weight at the bottom not only does it allow that action as you give a quick snap, just a slight twitch, a little bit of a snap to the taut line, to bring the heel of that hook up. I do believe that the weighted end is supposed to be the head of the nymph. and that giving it that snap, like I said, I think that mimics that action of a worm or a caterpillar type creature, arching its back, and then bending forward, arching its back, bending forward. It mimics it's almost like a dolphin kick type action, the way they wiggle in the water and the way they would swim, propel themselves. And it's a fly. You know, I don't see flies like this. I can't think of ever seeing a fly like this in recent memory. Especially nothing for sale, right? It's an interesting jig. I did fish one on Saturday. I caught a single sunfish on it. But like I said, this would be my modern interpretation of the wiggler. Just going with, this is this might be a 1/64th ball head, but tied in that more traditional panfish jig, crappie jig, bluegill jig type pattern with a traditional tail, some sort of dubbed or floss body, with a hackle collar. But I think that's going to do it for us today. If you get a chance and you find these old books, pick them up. I do believe there are some interesting tidbits that we can pull from some of this old literature, or maybe it's just me that finds that type of thing interesting. To me, the most interesting thing is the mention of this ice fly and having it sound like he's talking about the very first thing that they ever had seen. That something like this in the 40s was known, people knew about it, but it wasn't really a widespread thing, and people didn't really know how to tie them. So it was, one or two guys here and there. He does mention that the discovery could have happened simultaneously. I tend to think that that's true with a lot of jig tying. With certain techniques, with certain materials. And we've mentioned this before, having that being a local thing or a regional thing. Some things are discovered and lost and then rediscovered somewhere else. Like I envision that happening. In some of my experience, my life experience, it appears that way when it comes to jig tying, being taught things, listening to people explain something to me like it was brand new, just invented, and it's like, well, I've kind of seen that technique or material or jig style somewhere else. So I do think that's how a lot of our discoveries are, particularly in tying, flies, jigs, what have you. But this talks about going through much experimentation. A fly was fashioned roughly as follows: a small 10 to 14 sized hook with a medium long shank, a split shot pinched on the hook just at the bend, a body of silk floss usually made of some shade of orange or red, wings made of soft hackle, the down-like portion, and these wings tied in reverse, tail of like material sparsely covering the split shot. So that's all we have for a description of how it was tied, and then a very basic pen drawing that doesn't show the hackle up near the eye of the hook. It just shows the hackle near the split shot. But very interesting. They also include an illustration of the jigger bug, which is that more traditional ball head jig style. But I think that's going to do it for us today. Let's take one more look at this before we sign off. I will hold it by the eye. That's what we have. A description of the very first ice fly that I've read about, what they were describing as one of the first ice flies. I'm going to label it one of the founding flies for ice fishing. A very interesting pattern. I do believe it. You know, like I said, I did catch a single fish on it this weekend. I do believe a little bit more practice and figuring out that cadence or the rhythm or the, you know, how much of a jerk or snap that you have to give that line to make the jig kick up, hook first, is key to the way this thing is fished. It's very interesting to me. Hopefully, I got a couple more books coming. I just find them occasionally, a lot of eBay searches, and we have a old country town with a great big bookstore. I like to kind of dig through that place every once in a while and find some hidden gems. But I don't know. Tell me what you think. Put some comments down below. Should we tie more of these in the more modern style on a regular jig hook? Maybe there is something to be said, you know, instead of a chenille body, making it big and thick and giving it more bulk, is there something to be said about just a floss body? A lot of these things, it's fun for me to play with. But add some comments down below. Let me know what you think. But I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Feel free to share any of our videos, as it does help increase awareness for the channel. Check out the website jworthhandtied.com. And until next time, guys, tie yourself up some founding flies for ice fishing and tie lines.